Across the galaxy, warfare had evolved into something elegant: energy shields that deflected most projectiles, plasma weapons that could vaporize steel, and armor that could withstand the heat of a small star. The Galactic Coalition's military doctrine had been perfected over millennia, tested against dozens of species, each bringing their own technological marvels to the battlefield. Then, humanity arrived. The other species laughed at first. Humans still used kinetic weapons, crude metal projectiles fired by controlled explosions. Their rifles seemed primitive compared to particle beam weapons. Their bullets appeared laughably obsolete next to plasma bolts. Even their most advanced sniper systems relied on ancient physics that any first-year military academy student could explain. What the galaxy's finest warriors didn't understand was that sometimes, the old ways weren't abandoned because they were inferior. Sometimes, they were abandoned because they were too effective, too terrifying, too absolute in their lethality. The Zephyrian High Command was about to learn why humans had once aimed these weapons at each other, and why they had become so very, very good at it. The observation deck of the Zephyrian Dreadnought Stellar Dominance hummed with barely contained excitement. Through the reinforced transparisteel windows, the assembled officers watched as the newest members of the Galactic Coalition prepared for their first joint military exercise. Below them, on the asteroid training ground designated as Sigma 7, human soldiers moved with what the Zephyrians considered amusing inefficiency. Commander Vexthak, his scaled hide gleaming under the artificial lights, gestured toward the humans with one of his 4 arms. "Look at them, brothers. They move like hatchlings playing war games." The other Zephyrian officers chittered in agreement. Their species had dominated galactic warfare for over 3,000 years, their plasma-based weapons and energy shields making them nearly invincible on any battlefield. They had fought the crystalline Nexari, whose diamond-hard skin could deflect laser fire. They had battled the gaseous ethereals, who could phase through solid matter. They had even faced the mechanical synthetics, whose self-repairing armor seemed impossible to damage permanently. Against each of these formidable foes, Zephyrian technology had proven superior. Their plasma cannons could melt through Nexari crystal skin. Their phase-locked targeting systems could track ethereals even in their gaseous state. Their electromagnetic pulse weapons could disable synthetic repair systems. The Zephyrians had earned their reputation as the galaxy's premier military force through centuries of victory. "Observe their weapons," said Lieutenant Korthan, his voice dripping with disdain. "Metal projectiles propelled by chemical combustion. How delightfully primitive." Through their tactical viewers, the Zephyrian officers zoomed in on the human equipment. The soldiers below carried rifles that seemed almost crude in their simplicity, long metal tubes attached to wooden or synthetic stocks, with mechanical triggers and manual loading mechanisms. Compared to the sleek energy weapons of the Zephyrians, which could fire continuously without reloading and drew power from portable fusion cells, the human weapons looked like museum pieces. "I heard from the Nexari observers that these bullets are just metal slugs," another officer commented. "No energy discharge, no plasma formation, no molecular disruption. They simply fly through the air and hope to hit something." The assembled officers erupted in laughter. The concept seemed absurd. In an age where shields could deflect energy weapons and armor could disperse heat instantly across its surface, the idea of throwing pieces of metal at an enemy was laughable. "Perhaps they will throw rocks next," Vexthak suggested, causing another wave of amusement to ripple through the group. Down on the asteroid surface, the human soldiers seemed oblivious to the mockery above them. They moved in small groups, checking their equipment with methodical precision. Each soldier carried what appeared to be dozens of small metal containers, ammunition magazines, the observers realized, along with various optical devices that they mounted on their primitive weapons. "What are those devices?" asked Ensign Thysera, the youngest officer present. "Some form of targeting computer?" "Magnification lenses," replied Vexthak, consulting his datapad. "They enlarge the image of distant targets so the soldiers can aim their projectiles manually." Imagine manual aiming in the age of quantum targeting systems. The Zephyrian targeting systems could lock onto an enemy from kilometers away, automatically calculating for wind, gravity, target movement, and dozens of other variables. Their weapons fired plasma bolts that traveled at near light speed, making evasion virtually impossible. The idea that soldiers might need to aim manually, compensating for bullet drop and wind drift with their own calculations, seemed like something from the dark ages of warfare. I spoke with some ethereal commanders yesterday, said Korthven. They expressed concern about including humans in our joint operations. They believe these primitive weapons might somehow prove effective against modern defenses. Ethereal paranoia, scoffed Vexthak. Their gaseous nature makes them overly cautious about any physical projectile. But, consider the facts: our personal shields can deflect incoming kinetic energy up to 15,000 joules. Our armor can disperse impact forces across its entire surface area. These human bullets, traveling at perhaps 1,000 meters per second, would barely scratch our equipment. The other officers nodded in agreement. Zephyrian personal shields had been tested against railguns firing projectiles at tremendous velocities. Even magnetic acceleration systems, which could propel metal slugs at several times the speed of human bullets, had proven ineffective against properly calibrated defensive systems. What puzzles me, said THYSSERA, is why the Coalition Council accepted their membership application. Their technology is clearly inferior to every other member species. Politics, replied Vexthak with disgust. The humans control several resource-rich systems that the Council desires. Their industrial capacity is supposedly impressive, though I cannot imagine what they manufacture with such primitive methods. Resource extraction and farming equipment, mostly, said Korthven. The reports indicate they are quite skilled at terrestrial engineering projects. Apparently, they have transformed numerous uninhabitable worlds into productive colonies. Useful for logistics support, then, concluded Vexthak. Let them handle supply lines and infrastructure while real warriors conduct actual combat operations. On the asteroid below, the humans had begun what appeared to be a training exercise. Through their viewers, the Zephyrian officers watched as human soldiers took positions behind various cover points: rocks, artificial barriers, and small structures placed throughout the training ground. Some soldiers lay flat on the ground, their weapons resting on mechanical supports that seemed to be made of lightweight metal. What are they doing? Asked THYSSERA. Target practice, apparently, replied Vexthak. See those markers in the distance? Approximately 2 kilometers away. The officers adjusted their viewers to focus on the distant targets: simple geometric shapes mounted on posts, barely visible even through the Zephyrian magnification systems. 2 kilometers, said Korthvan incredulously. They intend to hit targets at that range with kinetic projectiles? The effective range of most Zephyrian infantry weapons was approximately 500 meters, though their accuracy decreased significantly beyond 300 meters. Even their specialized long-range plasma rifles rarely engaged targets beyond 800 meters, and those weapons required sophisticated targeting computers to maintain accuracy. Watch them waste ammunition, said Vexthak. This should be amusing. The first human soldier fired his weapon. Even across the vacuum of space, the observers could see the tiny flash of chemical combustion through their sensors. Almost immediately, one of the distant targets erupted in a shower of fragments. The Zephyrian officers fell silent. Coincidence, muttered Korthvan after a moment. The second soldier fired. Another target destroyed. Then, the third, fourth, and fifth soldiers fired in rapid succession. Each shot resulted in another target's destruction. The humans weren't missing, they were hitting their marks with disturbing consistency. Their targeting computers must be more sophisticated than we assumed, said Vexthak, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. Sir, said THYSSERA hesitantly, I don't see any electronic emissions from their weapons. Our sensors would detect targeting computer transmissions, but I'm reading nothing but the chemical combustion signatures. That's impossible, snapped Vexthak. No organic being can calculate ballistic trajectories at that range with manual aiming. But, as they watched, more human soldiers took their turns. Each shot was carefully aimed, with long pauses between the targeting and firing sequences. The humans seemed to be making calculations in their heads, adjusting their positions minutely before pulling their triggers. Most disturbing of all, they were hitting their targets with remarkable frequency. Perhaps the targets are larger than they appear, suggested Korthvan weakly. THYSS checked her scanner readings. Sir, those targets measure approximately 30 centimeters across. At 2 kilometers distance, they present an angular target of less than 0.01 degrees. The implications hung in the air like a toxic gas. The humans were manually hitting targets that would challenge even Zephyrian automated systems, using primitive weapons that seemed to rely entirely on the skill of the individual soldier. There must be some technology we're not detecting, insisted Vexthak. Microscopic guidance systems embedded in their projectiles, perhaps, or some form of gravitational field manipulation. Sir, said THYSS quietly, I'm detecting something else. The projectiles, they're traveling much faster than our initial estimates suggested. How much faster? Approximately 1200 meters per second, sir. But that's not the concerning part. She paused, checking her readings again. The kinetic energy readings are far higher than they should be for such velocities. Vexthak snatched the scanner from her hands, studying the data himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. The human projectiles carried kinetic energy levels approaching 20,000 joules, well beyond the deflection capacity of standard Zephyrian personal shields. That can't be right, he muttered. Simple metal projectiles can't carry that much energy. But the scanner readings were clear and consistent. Somehow, these primitive human weapons were generating kinetic energy levels that surpassed the defensive capabilities of the galaxy's most advanced personal protection systems. Sir, said Korthven nervously, should we inform High Command about these readings? Vexthak hesitated. Reporting that human weapons might pose a threat to Zephyrian defenses would be tantamount to admitting that their own intelligence gathering had been inadequate. It would also suggest that the primitive humans might not be as technologically inferior as previously assumed. Continue monitoring, he said finally. We need more data before drawing any conclusions. But, deep in his mind, a troubling thought began to take root. If the humans could achieve such results with seemingly primitive technology, what other capabilities might they be concealing? And, why would a species capable of such precision in warfare choose to join the Galactic Coalition as junior members? On the asteroid surface below, the human soldiers continued their training, unaware that their every shot was being scrutinized by increasingly nervous alien observers. Each successful hit chipped away at centuries of Zephyrian confidence, replacing certainty with questions that no one wanted to ask aloud. The exercise continued for several more hours, with human soldiers demonstrating consistent accuracy at ranges that impressed even the skeptical Zephyrian officers. As the session concluded, the humans methodically cleaned their weapons and packed their equipment with the same careful precision they had shown throughout the training. Perhaps, said THYSS quietly as they watched the humans prepare to return to their transport, we should request a demonstration of their capabilities in our next joint exercise. Vexthak's response was a non-committal grunt, but his mind was racing. The humans had been accepted into the coalition as a minor species, expected to provide support services while the major powers handled military operations. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if these seemingly primitive weapons represented something far more dangerous than anyone had realized? As the observation session ended and the Zephyrian officers dispersed to their respective duties, none of them noticed the small human transport ship that had been monitoring their dreadnought throughout the exercise. Aboard that ship, human intelligence officers had recorded every scanner sweep, every tactical analysis, and every concerned comment made by their alien observers. The humans had learned exactly what they needed to know about Zephyrian defensive capabilities, and they had done so while appearing to be nothing more than primitive newcomers struggling to keep up with galactic military standards. The first phase of humanity's integration into the Galactic Coalition was proceeding exactly as planned. 3 weeks after the observation incident, the Zephyrian High Command received an unexpected communication from Coalition headquarters. The message was brief and direct. All member species would participate in a large-scale military exercise designed to test interspecies combat coordination. The exercise would simulate a defensive scenario against a hypothetical invasion force, with mixed units from different species working together to repel the attackers. Fleet Admiral Korthek, Supreme Commander of the Zephyrian military, reviewed the exercise parameters with growing irritation. The scenario placed human units in forward reconnaissance positions, supposedly leveraging their unique technological approaches to provide early warning and harassment capabilities for the main Zephyrian and Nexari battle formations. "They want us to rely on primitive kinetic weapons for reconnaissance," he growled, his scales shifting to an angry crimson coloration. "This is absurd." His aide, Commander SciFi, consulted her tactical display. "Sir, the human contingent has requested permission to deploy what they call sniper teams in advanced positions. According to their tactical doctrine, these teams can engage targets at extreme range while remaining undetected." "Extreme range with chemical projectile weapons?" Korthek's voice carried the distinctive hissing sound that indicated Zephyrian skepticism. "Define extreme range." "Sir, they claim effective engagement distances of up to 4 kilometers for individual targets, with confirmed elimination capability at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. The Admiral's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. "Impossible. Our own precision plasma weapons struggle to maintain accuracy beyond 1 kilometer, even with full targeting computer assistance. These humans are either delusional or lying." "Perhaps, sir, but Coalition Command has approved their deployment parameters. We are required to integrate their units into our tactical framework." Korthek studied the holographic battlefield display that showed the exercise area, a moon-sized artificial construct created specifically for large-scale military training. The terrain featured varied environments, mountainous regions, urban simulation areas, open plains, and dense forest analogs. The human sniper teams were requesting positions in the mountainous areas, claiming they could provide overwatch coverage for the entire battlefield from elevated positions. Very well, he decided. Let them play their games. When their primitive weapons prove inadequate, we will demonstrate proper military tactics. Deploy our standard reconnaissance drones to the same areas. We'll need actual intelligence gathering while the humans waste time with their toys. 2 days later, the exercise began. The Zephyrian fleet positioned itself in orbital stations around the artificial moon, ready to deploy ground forces in response to simulated enemy movements. The enemy in this case would be controlled by artificial intelligence systems programmed to utilize tactics and technologies from various hostile species the Coalition had encountered in the past. On the moon's surface, mixed Coalition forces took their assigned positions. The Nexari deployed their crystalline warriors in the urban areas, their diamond-hard bodies providing excellent protection in close-quarters combat. The ethereal units dispersed throughout the forest regions, their ability to phase between solid and gaseous states making them ideal for ambush tactics. The synthetic forces established defensive perimeters with their self-repairing fortifications. And, in the mountainous terrain, small teams of human soldiers took positions that seemed impossibly exposed to the Zephyrian observers. "Sir," reported Commander Vexthak, who had been assigned as liaison to the human units, "the human teams have selected positions with clear lines of sight across the entire battlefield. They appear to be making no effort at concealment." Admiral Korthek studied the tactical display from his command ship. The human positions were clearly marked, sitting on ridgelines and elevated points that offered excellent visibility but seemed to provide minimal protection. Any competent enemy force would identify and eliminate those positions within minutes of engagement. "How many soldiers in each team?" he asked. "2 per team, sir. One operates the weapon while the other uses optical equipment to spot targets and calculate environmental factors." 2 soldiers to cover entire sectors of battlefield? Korthek's disbelief was evident. "Our reconnaissance doctrine requires minimum squad strength of 12 soldiers with supporting equipment for equivalent areas." "Yes, sir. The humans claim their doctrine emphasizes precision over volume of fire." Before Korthek could respond, the exercise alert sounded. Enemy forces had been detected approaching the perimeter. The first phase of the simulation had begun. On the tactical display, red markers appeared at multiple points around the moon's surface, indicating incoming hostile units. The artificial intelligence controlling the enemy forces had chosen a multi-pronged assault, with major attacks targeting the urban and forest areas while smaller harassment forces moved through the mountainous regions. "Standard response," ordered Korthek. "Deploy interceptor squadrons to engage the main assault forces." Ground units will establish killing zones in the urban and forest sectors. The Zephyrian fleet responded with practiced efficiency. Plasma-armed interceptor craft screamed toward the enemy formations while ground-based energy weapons began charging for long-range bombardment. On the surface, Nexary and ethereal units moved into combat positions, preparing to meet the incoming attackers. Then, something unexpected happened. "Sir," called out sensor operator NYTH Cole, his voice tight with confusion, "I'm detecting weapons discharge from the human positions." "Already?" Korthek checked the tactical timeline. "Enemy units are still 7 kilometers from the nearest human position." "What are they firing at?" "Unknown, sir." "I'm reading chemical combustion signatures consistent with their kinetic weapons, but I see no targets within their engagement range." On the holographic display, several enemy markers suddenly disappeared from the mountainous approach routes. The artificial intelligence system registered them as eliminated, but no explanation appeared for their destruction. "Sensor malfunction," declared Korthek. "Enemy units don't simply vanish." But more markers continued to disappear. Each time a human position fired, indicated by the brief flare of chemical combustion, an enemy unit would be marked as eliminated. The pattern was consistent and undeniable. "Sir," said Vexthak urgently, "I'm in communication with the human spotters. They report successful elimination of advanced reconnaissance units attempting to infiltrate through mountain passes." "At what range?" demanded Korthek. "The first eliminations were recorded at 3.2 kilometers, sir." Silence fell over the Zephyrian command center. Even their most optimistic estimates had placed the maximum effective range of human weapons at perhaps 1.5 kilometers, and that assumed perfect conditions with stationary targets. "Magnify Sector 7, ordered the Admiral. "I want visual confirmation." The main display shifted to show a mountainous region where one of the human sniper teams was positioned. Through the high-resolution sensors, they could see 2 human soldiers lying prone on a rocky outcrop. One soldier peered through an optical device mounted on his weapon, while the other used separate magnification equipment to scan the terrain ahead. As they watched, the weapon operator made minute adjustments to his position, moving the rifle barrel by tiny increments. His partner spoke quietly into a communication device, apparently providing targeting information. After a long moment of stillness, the weapon fired. 7 seconds later, an enemy marker disappeared from the tactical display, a marker that represented a target over 4 kilometers from the human position. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Zesfi. "No organic being can make those calculations without computer assistance." But the evidence was undeniable. The human soldiers were engaging and eliminating targets at ranges that exceeded the capabilities of most Zephyrian vehicle-mounted weapons systems. Moreover, they were doing it with single shots, each carefully aimed and precisely delivered. "What type of ammunition are they using?" asked Korthek. Vexthak consulted his datapad. "According to their equipment specifications, standard kinetic projectiles. Metal cores with aerodynamic shaping for long-range stability. No guidance systems? No energy enhancement?" "None detected, sir." The projectiles appear to be completely passive after firing. Over the next 2 hours, the exercise continued with increasingly disturbing results from the Zephyrian perspective. The human sniper teams systematically eliminated every enemy unit that attempted to move through the mountainous terrain, often engaging multiple targets within minutes of each other. Their accuracy rate approached 90%, far better than Zephyrian energy weapons achieved under similar conditions. But accuracy wasn't the only surprising factor. The psychological effect of the human weapons was becoming apparent in the artificial intelligence's tactical responses. Enemy units began avoiding the mountainous regions entirely, concentrating their forces in areas where the human teams couldn't engage them. The mere presence of those primitive kinetic weapons was shaping the entire battle. "Sir," reported sensor operator NYTH Cole, "I'm detecting something unusual about the projectiles themselves." "What kind of unusual?" "The ballistic trajectories don't match our calculations. The projectiles are maintaining stable flight paths despite atmospheric interference, wind patterns, and gravitational variations." Korthek frowned. Elaborate. Sir, according to our physics models, kinetic projectiles fired at these ranges should show significant trajectory deviation due to environmental factors. The human projectiles are flying as if they're following programmed flight paths. But, you said there were no guidance systems. Correct, sir. No electronic emissions, no course corrections, no propulsion systems. The projectiles are completely passive, yet they're behaving like guided munitions. The implication sent a chill through the command center. If humans could achieve guided munition accuracy with passive projectiles, it suggested a level of ballistic calculation that surpassed anything in the Coalition database. It meant that human soldiers were manually performing computations that typically required sophisticated computer systems. As the exercise entered its final phase, the enemy artificial intelligence attempted one last desperate gambit. Unable to penetrate the mountainous defenses, it launched a concentrated assault on the human positions themselves, hoping to eliminate the troublesome snipers before resuming its original attack plan. The Zephyrian observers watched as enemy forces, represented by automated drones for this portion of the exercise, began climbing the mountainous terrain toward the human positions. The drones moved with mechanical precision, using advanced camouflage and erratic movement patterns to avoid detection and targeting. Finally, muttered Admiral Korthek. Let's see how their primitive weapons perform against adaptive targets using evasive maneuvers. The first drone approached to within 2 kilometers of the nearest human team before being detected. The human spotter called out target coordinates, and the sniper began tracking the rapidly moving drone through his optical sight. The drone, programmed with combat algorithms from dozens of species, immediately began evasive action. It darted between rocks, changed elevation rapidly, and even used short-range teleportation capabilities to break targeting locks. The human sniper tracked it calmly, making continuous adjustments to his aim point. He seemed to be calculating not where the drone was, but where it would be when his projectile arrived. When he fired, the drone was moving at maximum speed toward a teleportation point that would place it behind solid cover. The projectile intercepted the drone mid-teleportation, striking it at the exact moment it rematerialized in its new position. By the ancient depths, whispered Commander Vexthak. He predicted the teleportation destination. Admiral Korthek stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. The human soldier had manually calculated a firing solution that accounted for instantaneous teleportation, something that had never been attempted with kinetic weapons. But the demonstration wasn't over. As more drones approached the human positions, each sniper team began engaging multiple targets simultaneously. One soldier would fire while his partner was already spotting the next target. The precision and speed of their engagement was breathtaking. Within 30 minutes, every attacking drone had been eliminated. The human teams had successfully defended their positions against an adaptive artificial intelligence using only primitive kinetic weapons and manual targeting. Exercise concluded, announced the communication system. All units returned to designated assembly areas for debriefing. As the various coalition forces began withdrawing from their positions, Admiral Korthek found himself facing an uncomfortable reality. The humans, with their supposedly primitive weapons and outdated tactics, had performed better than any other unit in the exercise. Their engagement accuracy exceeded that of the most advanced Zephyrian systems, and their tactical effectiveness had shaped the entire battle. Sir, said Commander Zesfi quietly, perhaps we should request additional information about human military capabilities. Korthek nodded slowly. Contact Coalition Intelligence. I want complete files on human weapons technology, training methods, and combat doctrine. Clearly, our initial assessments were inadequate. As the Zephyrian fleet prepared to depart the exercise area, none of the alien observers noticed the small transport ship that detached from the human contingent and slipped away into the void. Aboard that ship, human intelligence officers reviewed the data they had collected during the exercise, detailed scans of Zephyrian weapons systems, sensor capabilities, and tactical responses. The second phase of humanity's integration into the Galactic Coalition was complete. The galaxy's military powers had been given a carefully controlled demonstration of human capabilities, just enough to reshape their assumptions without revealing the full extent of humanity's potential. But, more importantly, humanity had learned everything they needed to know about alien defensive technologies and tactical doctrines. When the time came for the real test, not an exercise, but an actual battle, they would be ready. The crisis began 6 months after the joint exercise, when long-range sensors detected an unknown fleet approaching Coalition space. The vessels used technology that matched no known species in the galactic database, and their intentions appeared hostile based on their aggressive approach vectors and weapon charging signatures. The fleet was massive, over 300 ships ranging from destroyer-class vessels to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest Coalition warships. Their technology seemed to incorporate elements from multiple species, suggesting they were either an undiscovered civilization with remarkable adaptability or, more troubling, a confederation of hostile species working together. High Admiral Vostran, Supreme Commander of the Coalition Defense Force, convened an emergency meeting aboard the flagship Unity of Purpose. Representatives from every major military species gathered in the war room, their various forms of communication filling the space with a cacophony of sounds, colors, and electromagnetic pulses. Intelligence estimates the hostile fleet will reach our outer perimeter in 72 hours, announced Vostran, his crystalline Nexary voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems. Their technology appears to be specifically designed to counter our standard defensive measures. A holographic display showed detailed scans of the approaching vessels. Their shields were configured to disperse energy weapons across broader frequency ranges than previously encountered. Their armor incorporated crystalline matrices similar to Nexary defensive systems but with enhanced kinetic absorption capabilities. Most disturbing, their electronic warfare suites seemed capable of disrupting the targeting computers and guidance systems that Coalition forces relied upon. Preliminary analysis suggests these hostiles have studied our tactics and technologies extensively, continued the High Admiral. They appear prepared to counter plasma weapons, particle beams, and guided munition systems. Our conventional advantage has been negated. Fleet Admiral Korthek leaned forward, his Zephyrian features dark with concern. What about our numerical superiority? The Coalition can deploy over 800 vessels within the next 48 hours. Numbers may not be sufficient, replied the ethereal representative, her gaseous form shimmering with agitated patterns. If their technology truly counters our primary weapon systems, ship count becomes irrelevant. The debate continued for hours as various species proposed increasingly desperate solutions. The synthetics suggested a massive automated drone assault. The ethereals recommended phasing attacks that might bypass enemy shields. The Nexary proposed close-quarters ramming tactics using their crystalline hulls as weapons. All of these suggestions shared a common flaw: they required Coalition forces to engage the enemy directly, accepting massive casualties in the hope of eventual victory. Then, Human Admiral Sarah Chin spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "We have an alternative approach to consider," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the multilingual chaos with quiet confidence. The chamber fell silent. The other species had almost forgotten the human representative was present. Their forces were so small compared to the major military powers that they were usually considered more observers than participants in strategic planning. "Explain your proposal," said High Admiral Vostran. Admiral Chen activated a personal holographic display, showing the approaching enemy fleet with enhanced tactical markings. The hostile vessels are designed to counter energy-based weapons systems and guided munitions. Their defenses are optimized for the types of threats they expect to encounter from Coalition forces. "Yes, we've established that," said Korthek impatiently. "What is your point?" "They haven't optimized their defenses against kinetic weapons," replied Chen. "Their shields are configured for energy dispersion, not kinetic impact absorption. Their electronic warfare systems target guidance computers that our weapons don't use. Their tactical doctrine assumes engagement ranges typical of energy weapons, ranges where kinetic weapons have traditionally been considered ineffective." The chamber erupted in skeptical responses. The Zephyrian and Nexary representatives were particularly vocal in their dismissal of human kinetic weapons as a viable solution to the crisis. "Admiral Chen," said Vostran, his tone diplomatically neutral, "human weapons have shown impressive accuracy in training exercises, but this situation requires firepower capable of destroying heavily armored warships. Chemical propellant weapons simply lack the energy output necessary for ship-to-ship combat. Shen smiled, an expression that the translation systems interpreted as confident amusement for the benefit of non-human observers. High Admiral, I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human weapons technology. What you observed in our exercises represents our infantry small arms, personal weapons designed for individual soldiers. Our ship-to-ship kinetic weapons operate on entirely different principles. She manipulated the holographic display, showing a technical schematic of what appeared to be a massive cannon system. This is a Mark VII naval railgun, she explained. It uses electromagnetic acceleration to propel solid projectiles at velocities approaching 4% of light speed. The kinetic energy transfer from a single projectile equals approximately 50,000 terajoules, roughly equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Even the constant background noise of various species' communication systems seemed to pause. That's impossible, whispered the synthetic representative through its mechanical voice synthesizer. Kinetic projectiles cannot achieve such velocities without massive power requirements. Our power requirements are substantial, admitted Chun. Each shot requires the entire output of a ship's main reactor for approximately 3 seconds. Rate of fire is limited to 1 shot every 30 seconds under optimal conditions. Then, your weapons are impractical for ship combat, declared Korthek. Modern naval engagement requires sustained fire over extended periods. Single-shot weapons with lengthy reload times are useless in fleet actions. Admiral Chen's smile widened. That would be true if we needed to engage in prolonged firefights. But, our tactical doctrine doesn't call for extended exchanges. We prefer what we call one shot, one kill. She manipulated the display again, showing ballistic trajectories between human ship positions and hypothetical enemy vessels. At 4% of light speed, our projectiles reach maximum effective range in approximately 12 minutes. Enemy vessels would have that long to detect the incoming rounds and attempt evasive maneuvers. However, at those velocities, the projectiles are essentially impossible to intercept with point defense systems. And, if they miss, asked the ethereal representative. They don't miss, Chen replied simply. Our targeting calculations account for all variables: enemy course, speed, acceleration potential, gravitational influences, stellar magnetic fields, and relativistic effects. We've been refining these calculations for over 2 centuries of space warfare. High Admiral Vostran studied the human schematic with growing interest. Admiral Chen, are you suggesting that human vessels can engage enemy ships at ranges where the enemy cannot effectively return fire? Precisely. Our maximum effective engagement range is approximately 2 light hours. Most energy weapons lose coherence and accuracy beyond 1 light minute. If we position our vessels correctly, we can eliminate the hostile fleet before they can close to their optimal engagement range. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembled military leaders. If human claims were accurate, they possessed the ability to conduct ship-to-ship combat at ranges 20 times greater than conventional weapons. They could destroy enemy vessels while remaining completely outside the range of retaliation. How many ships do you have equipped with these railgun systems? Asked Korthek. Every human vessel carries at least 1 railgun system, replied Chen. Our larger ships mount multiple systems with different projectile types: armor-piercing rounds for heavily protected targets, explosive rounds for groups of smaller vessels, and specialized electromagnetic pulse rounds for disabling enemy electronics. How many human ships can you deploy within the next 48 hours? Admiral Chen consulted her personal display device. 67 vessels are currently within deployment range. Another 32 can reach the engagement area within 72 hours if we begin movement immediately. Fleet Admiral Korthek performed rapid calculations in his head. Less than 100 ships against over 300 enemy vessels. Even with superior range and accuracy, the numbers seem inadequate. Perhaps, said Chen. But, consider this: our projectiles travel in straight lines at constant velocity once fired. We can calculate precise impact times for all targets simultaneously. If we coordinate our firing properly, we can engage the entire enemy fleet in a single, massive salvo. She manipulated the display to show a complex firing solution with dozens of trajectory lines converging on the approaching enemy fleet. 99 ships firing simultaneously can engage up to 360 targets, assuming our larger vessels fire multiple rounds from different gun systems. Every enemy ship can be targeted before any of them realize they're under attack. The tactical beauty of the proposal was undeniable. A coordinated human assault would eliminate the entire enemy fleet in a single devastating blow, delivered from ranges where retaliation was impossible. "What do you require from coalition forces?" asked High Admiral Vostran. "Positioning data and target designation for the enemy fleet," replied Chen. "Our sensors are adequate for navigation, but we need detailed tactical scans to ensure optimal target assignment. We also request that coalition vessels remain outside the engagement area during the attack." "Why?" "Our projectiles cannot distinguish between enemy and friendly vessels. Anything in the target area when the rounds arrive will be destroyed. The engagement zone will be approximately 1 light hour in diameter around the enemy fleet's projected position." Admiral Korthak leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Admiral Chen, if your weapons are as effective as you claim, why did humanity join the coalition as junior members? You could have demanded status as a major military power." Chen's expression became serious. "Admiral Korthak, our weapons are extremely effective against space vessels and stationary targets. However, they're less useful for planetary occupation, police actions, or other military operations that require precision and restraint. We joined the coalition because we have no desire to become a conquering empire. We prefer peaceful cooperation with other species." "But, you're willing to use these weapons to defend coalition space?" "Absolutely. The approaching fleet threatens all coalition members, including humanity. We have no choice but to respond with maximum force." Over the next 18 hours, human vessels began arriving at the designated engagement area. The ships themselves were unremarkable by galactic standards, functional designs that prioritized internal space over aesthetic appeal. But, as coalition sensors examined them more closely, the alien observers began to understand why human vessel design looked so different from their own. "By the ancient crystals," whispered a Nexary sensor operator, "look at the power generation systems on those ships." Human vessels carried fusion reactors that produced nearly 10 times more energy than equivalent-sized coalition ships. The extra power wasn't used for shields, engines, or life support, it was entirely dedicated to the massive electromagnetic acceleration systems that ran the length of each vessel. "Their entire ship design is built around the weapon system," observed a Zephyrian tactical analyst. "Everything else is secondary." As the human fleet took position, Admiral Chen transmitted detailed firing solutions to each ship. The mathematics were staggering, thousands of variables calculated to ensure that projectiles fired from different locations would arrive at their targets simultaneously, despite traveling for hours through complex gravitational fields and electromagnetic interference. "Hostile fleet has entered maximum engagement range," reported the coalition sensor network. "Distance, 2.1 light hours and closing." Admiral Chen opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All vessels, you have firing solutions for designated targets. Prepare for coordinated salvo on my mark." On 99 human warships, massive railgun systems charged to full power. Electromagnetic coils that ran for hundreds of meters through the length of each vessel began generating magnetic fields of incredible intensity. "Hostile fleet maintaining approach vector," reported sensors. "No indication they have detected human forces." "All vessels report ready," came the response from the human fleet. Admiral Chen studied her tactical display one final time. The enemy fleet was positioned exactly where the calculations predicted. The firing solutions were optimal. Every human ship had a clear line of sight to their assigned targets. "All vessels," she announced calmly, "engage at will." Across the human fleet, 99 railgun systems fired simultaneously. The massive electromagnetic discharge was visible across multiple light hours as intense magnetic fields accelerated solid projectiles to 4% of light speed. The projectiles themselves were works of art, dense metallic cores surrounded by guidance-free stabilization systems that would keep them on target despite any interference they might encounter during their journey. Each round carried the kinetic energy of a small star's explosion, concentrated into a package no larger than a human fist. For the next 2 hours, those projectiles raced through space toward their targets. The enemy fleet continued its approach, unaware that death was traveling toward them at 40,000 kilometers per second. When the projectiles finally reached their destination, the results were spectacular. 312 enemy vessels were struck simultaneously by rounds moving at relativistic velocities. The kinetic energy release vaporized ship hulls, shattered armor plating that should have been impervious to conventional weapons, and turned sophisticated enemy technology into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The entire hostile fleet was destroyed in less than 30 seconds. Coalition forces, monitoring from positions hundreds of light-minutes away, watched in stunned silence as the most powerful enemy fleet they had ever encountered simply ceased to exist. "By all the depths of space," whispered Fleet Admiral Korthek. "They eliminated 300 ships without taking a single casualty." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system with characteristic calm. "Hostile fleet has been neutralized. All human vessels report successful target elimination. No friendly casualties." In the aftermath of the battle, as coalition vessels moved into the engagement area to conduct damage assessment and debris recovery, the alien observers began to understand the true nature of humanity's place in the galaxy. The humans hadn't joined the coalition as junior members because they were weak. They had joined as junior members because they were too dangerous to be left alone. Their weapons technology represented a level of destructive capability that could reshape galactic politics if used aggressively. But they had chosen cooperation over conquest, partnership over domination. Admiral Chen said High Admiral Vostran over the fleet communication system, "The coalition owes humanity a profound debt. Your tactics and weapons have saved countless lives today." "No debt necessary," replied Chen. "We're all part of the same coalition. Protecting each other is what allies do." As the human fleet began its return journey to coalition space, Admiral Korthek found himself with a new understanding of the species he had initially dismissed as primitive. Their weapons weren't crude, they were elegant in their simplicity. Their tactics weren't outdated, they were so advanced that other species had never encountered anything like them. The humans had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most effective solutions were also the most straightforward. Sometimes the best way to win a war was to make it so brief and decisive that the enemy never had a chance to fight back. In the depths of space, human vessels continued their patrol routes, their railgun systems ready to defend coalition space against any threat that might emerge. And, in the command centers of dozens of species, military planners began the long process of revising their assumptions about warfare, technology, and the quiet humans who had revolutionized both. The galaxy had learned to respect human weapons. But, more importantly, it had learned to trust human restraint, the wisdom to possess ultimate destructive power while choosing to use it only in defense of others. That, perhaps, was humanity's greatest weapon of all.